Hello, everyone. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is my first time in Dubai. It's been a very wonderful stay and a very beautiful welcome. I was talking to the organizer of this event, or one of the organizers, who's Payman, and he was kind of telling me the story of how this came about. And I thought it was a very Dubai story. He said, a month and a half ago, we had this idea to just kind of have a social media awards where we give out about 15 awards. And then His Highness said, that's great, but let's turn this into the biggest technology event in the Middle East ever. And we had 1.5 months to turn it from this very small core into this giant event. And, I thought with how big and oversized everything here in Dubai was, it really kind of fit along with the ethos. It reminded me very much of the story of how the Burj Khalifa was invented. And, I really liked hearing that story about how this event kind of started as something small and then turned into something giant through the process of thinking it out and working it out. Because it's very similar to what I do and how Humans of New York started. I'm not sure the extent of everyone's familiarity with it, but Humans of New York is a blog that I run out of New York City, where essentially what I do is I stop people on the streets of New York every single day, just kind of ordinary people, and I stop them, and I take their photograph, and I learn a little bit about their lives, and I tell their stories, and I can normally include about 4 or 5 of these on my blog every single night. And in the process of doing this, I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years. About 15 million people follow on social media now. It is a #1 New York Times best-selling book that's been on the bestseller list for over 30 weeks. I've had the opportunity to collaborate with the United Nations. I've had the opportunity to interview President Obama in the Oval Office. All of these very wonderful things have come from this. But what I think is one of the most amazing things about it is that when I began Humans of New York, when I decided to devote my life to it, it looked absolutely nothing like the Humans of New York that later became successful. And if there's, one message that I hope to kind of get across today with the story of Humans of New York is that nothing huge and nothing wonderful was ever built by waiting for that perfect idea. Just like this event, just like the Burj Khalifa. It starts with the work, and then the greatness of it and the success of it comes out of hundreds and thousands of tiny evolutions and tiny improvisations that are rooted in that work. I started photographing just 5 years ago when I lost my job. I worked in finance in Chicago. And what I would do is I would just go out into Chicago every single day, and I would just photograph everything. I never photographed before. I would just photograph anything that I found interesting. I used to take thousands of photos a day. And as you can see, my first shots weren't of people at all. They were just kind of things that I thought were beautiful. And then I took my first picture of a person. And now keep in mind, and again, I want to emphasize how amazing this is, that 15 million people follow my photography every single day. But 5 years ago, I'd never even taken a photograph before. That's a very modern phenomenon. That's what we're here to talk about, is how much the world has changed and how much power is in the hands of everyone here who has an idea to build something amazing. Not only build something amazing, but build something amazing fast. Because now 15 million people follow my work on social media. My first photograph that I ever took was only 5 years ago, after I lost my job in finance. And as you can see, it started with just very ordinary photos. I was just taking pictures of everything. And then one day I took a picture of people. And I remember the moment I took this photograph. I was on a subway in Chicago, and I saw these people. And these children don't know each other. These people don't know each other. But I looked at them, and they had the exact same look on their face. And I thought that was a very beautiful moment, that 2 children who didn't know each other at all just were looking at something similar and had this exact same look of wonderment on their face. And I had my camera in my hand, and I really wanted to take that photo, but I was scared. I was nervous. And I was like, is it okay to take a picture of a stranger? Is that something that's even allowed? And then I kind of got up my courage to take the photo. I pulled up my camera and snapped the picture real quick. And then that's what I got. And I remember thinking that I had created something special. That there were tons of pictures on the internet of buildings and places and things. I always said anything in New York City that doesn't talk or move has been photographed 10,000 different times from 10,000 different angles. But when I took that picture of a person and those people, and I got over that fear, I got over that initial fear to take that photo, even though I'd only been photographing for a couple months, I created something that was kind of special and something that was kind of new. Why? Because there was a fear I had to get over to do it. It didn't matter how good I was at taking the photo. There were hundreds of thousands of photographers who were much better trained than I was. But because I was willing to get over this fear of approaching people, I was able to create something that I thought was kind of different. I said, this is something special. I haven't photographed for very long, but I've discovered an ability to photograph strangers, to get over my fear, approach people, and photograph people. And because of that, I can do something different. And I go across the United States and I speak at colleges, and one of the things that I tell everyone there is that in the world of social media, think about your Instagram feeds, think about your Facebook feeds. So many people are trying to get your attention at all times. So how do you stick your head up above the crowd in that kind of audience? How do you get noticed? You be different. It's important to be good, yes, but it's more important to be different than to be good. And when you watch the story of You Humans of New York, you'll discover it's a process of me finding out what is different about my work. And then once I discover that, moving very hard in that direction and doubling down on that difference. And when I took a picture of the person, that I knew that was something different, so all I did after that was take pictures of people. And I had the idea that I was going to move to New York City and I was going to take 10,000 pictures of people in New York and I was going to plot them on a map of the city. That's how Humans of New York started. That looks nothing like what Humans of New York is today, but that was what I moved to New York. I packed all my stuff into 2 suitcases. I had no money, and I moved to New York just to do that and chase my dream. And the original photos look something like this. I love that picture because the guy and the dog have the exact same look on their face. And here was the next big evolution. Here is when I stumbled across one more thing that I could do differently. And when I discovered this, it made my work different enough that it started to go viral. You know, your work on social media, your work, one, grows, your audience grows in correlation with 2 things, the quality and the difference of it. And here's when I discovered what it was that I could do differently enough that would separate me so much from all of the other people who were doing photography and doing work on social media that would allow me to attract an audience very quickly. And as when I photographed this woman, and it wasn't that good of a photograph. You know, as you can see, I'm not that great of a photographer. But when I photographed her, I remember she said something to me. She said, I used to be a different color every single day, but one day I was green, and that was a very good day. So I've been green for 15 years now. And I said, I remember that. And I said, you know, she said something interesting. And then I went home that night. I had about 2,000 fans on social media at that time. Now I have 15 million. And this was just about 3 years ago, to give you an idea how fast things grew. And I said, you know, that picture's bad, but I remember she said those words to me. And I added those words as a caption to the photo. And suddenly, it was the best performing photo I had ever had. And there, bam, I finally struck on it. I finally figured out what I could do that was different than anybody else. And once you discover that, then you're primed to stand out on social media and to have success on social media. I realized that in addition to approaching strangers and taking their photos, I could learn their stories. And ever since that moment, the evolution of Humans of New York has been about me learning to stop a stranger on the street, to take their photo, and to learn to tell as intimate and as personal of a story as possible about that person. So what I will do is I will walk up to just an absolute stranger on the streets of New York. I'll say, excuse me, do you mind if I take your photograph? A lot of times people are very rude. I've been all over the world. Nobody turns me down more than in New York City. Everybody's in a hurry. Here, I notice the Eastern cultures are very much more hospitable. I have a lot of luck in the Middle East. In New York, everybody's don't have time, can't do it. So about 1 out of 3 people tell me no. If somebody agrees to let me take their photo, I take their photograph, and I come up to them and I say, what I do is I find out a little bit about everyone I photograph. And I might photograph you while you're talking and while you're thinking. And so when I'm interviewing someone to find out the story that I'm going to put on the blog later that night, I'm always looking for something that person can tell me that's different than any of the other 10,000 people I photographed. Remember why? Because if you want to stand out on the internet, if you want to make a product or anything that's new, it needs to be different. So just along that theme, when I'm talking to somebody on the street, I'm always looking for something they can tell me different than the other 10,000 people that I've talked to. And that's almost never an opinion, that's almost never a philosophy. Because of all of us in this room, a lot of us share the same opinions and the same philosophies, but all of us have an individual story. So I'm looking for that person's story. And so I might ask them one question that I often ask, and I'll demonstrate how that interview might go. What is your greatest struggle right now? That's one of my favorite questions. What is your greatest struggle right now? I am having a hard time living up to expectations. So I'll ask them, whose expectations specifically are you having trouble living up to? My wife's. What expectation of your wife's do you have the hardest time living up to? The expectation that I'm a good father. Why do you have a hard time living up to the expectation of being a good father? Because I can't detach myself from my work. What is the most painful thing in your family's life that you missed because you could not detach yourself from work? And the answer to that question will be a story. And that's the story that I will share with that person's picture that night. And I repeat this process over and over and over again on the streets of New York. And I've gone to 12 different countries. I've stopped strangers on the streets of countries in every continent. South Sudan, Iran, Iraq. Haven't done Dubai yet. I'm going to. And, it's just amazing to me that, one, people are very willing to share their stories with a stranger. And two, even the most ordinary person with enough curiosity can tell you the most unique and amazing story that you've ever heard if you're willing to stop and ask the right questions and listen to them long enough. Thank you guys very much.